Welcome back, everyone. Well, I woke up this morning to the news that Apple TV has dropped another trailer for Masters of the Air. I haven't watched it yet, but a few friends of mine who have told me it's much better than the first trailer that they released a few weeks ago. And so much like that one, I'm going to do another breakdown. And I also want to use this opportunity to address some of the concerns that some of you shared in the comment section of my breakdown of that last trailer. So if you want to see the trailer without me pausing and interrupting, say you want to watch it first and then come back and watch me break it down, there's a link in the description to the original from Apple TV if you want to do that first. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and dive right into this, and we'll try to decipher some of what's going on screen. I'm not going to break it down a ton because we've already done that some, and I will talk a little bit more about the history and address some of those concerns that people had about the first trailer and what they saw. So let's go ahead and dive in.
We lead our boys through.
So obviously we're going to see a lot of Elvis in this one, and by Elvis I mean the actor who played Elvis, because this is mostly an ensemble cast of people that are not household names, but since he has made it big since this was all filmed, they're gonna show him prominently in the trailer. That just is common marketing.
So you're happy?
A girl worth riding to is hard to find.
Not if you know where to look.
I'll miss you every second.
Major Egan, you were the first pilot assigned to the 100th.
Me and Buck Levin.
You are in charge of 35 planes and 350 air crewmen.
Don't you die on me before I get over there.
So a couple of things. They talk about the crews, 10-man crews. The 100th bomb group, which is what this particular bomb group is that they're focusing very heavily on, was one of the ones that flew the most sorties and took the most casualties. That's why they're called the Bloody 100th. I'm somewhat familiar with how this all operates because my wife's grandfather was a ball turret gunner on a B-17 in the 379th bomb group, who was known as the Grand Slam group because they were known to have dropped the most tons of bombs and a bunch of other things that they basically won what was called the Grand Slam one particular month because of their performance. But this unit suffered heavily among B-17 bomb groups. The British, this is one of the things I wanted to address from the last one. We talked about night bombing versus day bombing because they show a scene where they talk about day bombing. The British were doing the night bombing. The Americans were doing a lot of the daytime bombing at this point, and so a lot of the Americans suffered very heavy casualties, especially earlier in the bombing campaign, because they didn't have fighter coverage that could go all the way with them into the heart of Germany until later in the war.
Something big is brewing.
The 8th will be sending up the largest air armada ever assembled in the history of mankind.
Straight into Hitler's territory.
So I think they're talking about the Schweinfurt-Regensburg raid here, which again, my wife's grandfather was a part of, and I did a video about the Schweinfurt raid. It was this massive, massive raid. And in fact, we'll take a look a little more into it.
We need complete and total air superiority.
So I want to talk about that for a second, because I'm sure that's what they're talking about here. And listen, when we're looking for quick reference, there's nothing wrong with Wikipedia. You're not going to use it to write a book or to, write a college paper. But most of the history stuff for Wikipedia, especially when we're just looking for quick reference, is pretty well referenced at the bottom. So I go to it a lot just because it's an easy place to find quick information that's easy to kind of decipher. Like I said, I wouldn't use it for research necessarily, but so you're talking 376 B-17s, 268 P-47 fighter sorties, and 60 bombers were lost. But let's talk about specifically this mission. It was Regensburg and Schweinfurt. I think it was a ball bearing factory in Schweinfurt for that part of the raid. Here's the 100th Bomb Group. They were one of 7 bomb groups that were assigned to the Regensburg Task Force. They lost 9 of their 21 aircraft in that raid. And that means that 12 returned. And again, we're talking about flying fortresses, B-17. So these things can get shot up pretty bad, lose pieces of the plane and still return. And when you're talking about a 10-man crew, you could lose half your crew and still land the plane. So just because 12 planes came back doesn't mean that 12 complete bomb groups or complete crews came back and healthy airplanes came back. So, yeah, they lost more than anybody else in the Regensburg Task Force. They lost 9 of their planes in that raid. And then looking over here, thankfully, my wife's grandfather's group out of Kim Bolton was one of the only ones that didn't lose any planes. They took 18 in and brought 18 home on that raid.
That's the mission.
What?
You might be the last pretty face I ever see.
What's the move?
I really appreciate, I want to go back to that scene for a second. I really appreciate just seeing this scene. You can see the holes in the side of the plane. You can see all of the expended 50 caliber ammunition on the floor there. They did. I mean, these things, they had guns all over the place. It's one of the reasons why they're called flying fortresses. And that's another thing. I mentioned something about their ability to take a beating and still keep flying in relation to them being called flying fortresses. That's not originally why they got the name. They got the name because of how heavily armed they were. But as time went on and they learned how much of a beating these things could take, that name took on more of a meaning than just how heavily armed they were. But they were heavily armed. And so you see the commander of this air crew sitting there afterwards just kind of thinking about things, and I'm guessing he probably lost some guys in this raid.
What's the move?
I think he ends up, yeah, there you show the helmet with blood.
Going.
I think he ends up in a prison camp.
All that we do, day in, day out, does something to a guy, doesn't it?
We're here to fight the monsters. The things these people are capable of.
So here we see a scene of an American watching a train, presumably with people bound for either a slave labor camp or a death camp. And the only way that he would be seeing that, obviously, is if because he's on a train too, he's obviously a prisoner of war. A lot of these guys got shot down over enemy lines, and if you successfully brought down your plane or you parachuted out, you ended up a prisoner, and a lot of these guys did. And that's another thing I want to address from the previous trailer is we do see, and we haven't seen it yet, we see some scenes of the Tuskegee Airmen, who we know were actually based out of Italy, and they were flying escort missions for the bomb groups flying in Italy in a different Air Force, not the 8th Air Force. And a lot of people complained and said, oh, they're trying to be woke Hollywood and everything because they show the Tuskegee Airmen. Well, number one, we don't see any scenes, at least not yet, where the Tuskegee Airmen are escorting men of the 100th. So unless they actually do show that, then they haven't violated any historical accuracy. But we do know that some of the Tuskegee Airmen ended up in one of the same stalags, one of the same prison camps as men of the 100th. And it may be that that's where their stories are going to connect in this series. So we'll have to wait and see.
They got it coming. Trust me.
Ball turret, Gunner.
Lord, guard and guide the men who fly through the great spaces of the sky.
Are we Tuskegee men or
There they are. Yeah. Okay. And let's go back because
Through the great spaces of the sky.
Are we Tuskegee?
look at the map in the back. Turin, Milan. That's Italy. So we're accurate here, right? The Tuskegee Airmen are flying in Italy. That's where they were flying out of. So that's completely plausible. So from that standpoint, I'm glad they're telling their story. And a lot of people are complaining, well, of course, we've been told their story before. But here's the thing. This is being produced by Americans, right? This is being produced by Steven Spielberg, Tom Hanks, these guys. They did the story of American Marines in the Pacific. They did the story of an American airborne company in Europe. They're not going to just drop everything and say, oh, you know what, let's tell the story of one of the Lancaster bomb groups from the British. those stories deserve to be told every bit as much as these stories, but this is an American production for an American audience. So that's the reality. And I get it. Band of Brothers, most of those actors were British. They weren't American, and they're probably the case here too. But yeah, there are a ton of stories out there to be told, but these are the stories that draw the audiences. That's the unfortunate reality, and this is a business.
Men on what? Sir, yes, sir!
Be with them traversing the air in darkening storms or sunshine fair.
I think we may be done. We are gonna sit here and take it. We're gonna stick with our mission as long as we can fly.
So we're definitely going to be getting some scenes in these prison camps, which is something we haven't really seen before. There's going to be a lot of comparisons to Band of Brothers in the Pacific, because this is kind of the third in that trilogy, so to speak, because it's made by the same people, same writers, guys like John Orloff. So this will be an interesting look into life in the prison camp from that perspective.
We won't go without a fight.
All right, so I feel like that was a much better trailer than the last one, but let me know your thoughts. What do you think? And I'll throw up a link in at the end here on the end screen to my reaction to the previous trailer. But like I said, I think this one was a whole lot better. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Looking forward to it. Comes out at the end of January on Apple TV. And if you don't have Apple TV, and listen, I'm not getting sponsored by these guys or anything, but it's worth it just for Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso is one of my all-time favorite shows I've ever seen, so get it just for that. All right, thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon.